Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Experts in Action. We are so excited that you're here with us today. I'm Caitlin Green from Contentful Partnerships. I'll be moderating today's event, and we're just going to give a few more minutes for people to log in and join us. So stay tuned. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Experts in Action. This webcast series provides a platform where brands and partners can present what they've built on Contentful and share their learnings with our community of digital experts who are facing similar challenges and working on exciting digital products. I'm Caitlin Green. I'm a partner account manager here at Contentful. And joining me today are our friends from the Saadia Group, The Stable, and Contentful's very own in-house content evangelist. So I think everyone is joining now. Awesome. Welcome. So a quick few housekeeping rules. We are recording the event, so in case you can't stay till the end, we'll be sharing the recordings with you after in a day or two. And we will be doing Q&A kind of throughout the presentation or the discussion in the chat box, as well as a little bit at the end. So let's get right into it. With me today, we have Ravi Raparla, VP of Digital Products at the Saadia Group, Dan Hill, SVP of Platform Engineering at one of our partners, The Stable, and Nicole France, our Content Evangelist and Director of Content here at Contentful. So Ravi, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us more about the Saadia Group and what is the business, and within your role, what's Saadia's mission and what are the things that you've been facing, challenges? Give us a bit of a background if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kathleen. And thank you, everybody, whoever joined the session. Hope you find it very, very useful. So Saadia Group is a house of multi-brands. We buy mostly distressed companies so far and try to turn them around. So we have a portfolio of over 14 brands, and we are continuously acquiring new companies as we see. So Saadia is building a transformational company and a digital platform that can be used across our portfolio as we further existing brands as well as new brands. And as far as me, I'm the vice president of digital products. I manage the digital product team as well as the IT in Saadia Group.
Excellent. And what are some of the business challenges that you've been facing as an organization, maybe prior to working with The Stable and working with Contentful?
So as I said, like the most business problem is we are acquiring new companies. We have a portfolio, so every system is like disparate systems, and some of them have end of life systems. Some of them have. So what we're trying to do is consolidate and choose the best systems for each of specific areas, and so that we can leverage the benefits of shared services across IT, marketing, finance, but at the same time keeping the brand DNA in place. So that's a major problem that we are trying to solve by standardizing the digital operating system, or even creating a digital operating system that can be leveraged across the brands.
And Ravi, I know from a business model standpoint, this is particularly crucial for you guys at the Saadia Group, because it's not just a question of wanting to improve the systems, but we're talking cold hard cash here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because some of the brands that we have acquired are distressed, or going through the bankruptcy or after bankruptcy, so we're already losing money, cash flow. So the moment we acquire, we are in negative cash flow. So now we want to get through replatform as soon as possible, get to the best possible digital operating system, and creating that very efficient and optimized systems in place, so that we can break even and then lay a platform for us to grow and innovate.
Yeah, so it's like for real time is
Like
money.
it's real time money here, and also what we are seeing in the acquisition space is the time to integrate is also reducing. Like we have seen a lot of brands trying to see, like, speed is money and speed is cost. So sometimes, it's almost like I can see the parallel between home closing. The fastest you can close a house, those are the people who are getting in a very hot market.
Yeah, definitely.
So if we kind of summarize that around for our audience here, as a private equity organization, you're looking at a bunch of distressed brands, all kind of their own entities of branding, all with somewhat different digital problems or business problems that you're now trying to unify into an organized solution that'll help turn out more revenue for each of these individual groups. How is that related to, when you look at this across your portfolio, how did you make decisions around like the speed and time to market that you're able to prioritize these organizations and kind of help them accelerate now that they're under the Saadia Group?
So the approach that we take is, it has to be very, very reusable and very, very flexible, because the speed is very, very important. We cannot keep reinventing the wheel for each of the brand. So what we invent, we go by the atomic design principles, where we go with the lowest elements and designs that can be used across the board, and then add some molecules and organisms and pages and templates and follow that approach, so that we are building the blocks, and at the same time then we are adding and in addition to this, because we are also adding a brand level context as well, and so that it has the specific experience that the brands want, so that they can interact with the customers and their client segments, so they keep the brand DNA and by the same time we are getting the reusability and flexibility and the guardrails by using this composable approach.
And that composable commerce piece of how, Contentful has been working, throughout your organization. I'm curious to turn to Dan now and see, like, how does the Stable approach composable commerce? And what do you guys, how do you go to market and take that to your clients like the Saadia Group?
Yeah. It's a very interesting question, and it's a question we've been answering over the last couple of years. We have a product internally, and it's more of a framework and kind of a way of thinking, because it's a combination of code and practice. But we sought out about 2.5 years ago to solve a problem for our agency, and that was that we have a lot of clients with disparate systems, and in order to make our processes more efficient, we had to come up with a way to solve that problem and have at least some sort of lowest common denominator that we could reuse across those projects. And I think in trying to solve that problem, we've also solved problems for organizations like Saadia Group, who have multiple brands and similar problems, right? They have multiple different organizations operating under one roof. You want to allow each of those brands to, flex their creative muscles, but at the same time be, within some guardrails of a governance system, so that the efficiency of future brands, future additions beneath that umbrella, stay efficient and the business is able to move forward. So, our product, Bedrock, addresses all of those things. It's a combination of code and practice and process. There's one-to-one parity across all of those spaces, specifically to solve all the problems I just mentioned.
And Ravi, when your organization started working with the Stable, what was the appeal of Bedrock and kind of their approach to composable commerce. Like why was that a win for you when you first started engaging with them?
So one thing when we started engaging with Stables, we really liked them right off the bat. They sounded very, very professional. They know everything about Shopify, the platform that we have chosen to build this composable approach on, and also our ecosystem that we have selected, like Contentful and some of the other digital products that we have selected. The Stable team was very, very knowledgeable. And one thing which, as a digital first business, what we want to make sure is we go with the leaders and the thought leaders who are not just not an agency, but somebody who can guide us and give us the best practices and lay this foundation, so that, which is very, very important, because this is a foundation that we are going to replicate across brands, and we want to minimize our risk. And the Stables was, we have very, very talented people who had a lot of good knowledge and completely understood what multi-brands go through and what we are trying to achieve, our mission. They completely aligned, and also even before the sales, they came up with so many good ideas that we really liked and supported their partnership, and that was appeal, and they have worked with some great track record too, and we had some references, and they all turned out to be great references for them.
It's interesting. I just want to connect the dots here on this a little bit, because what we're really talking about here is, on one hand, the speed, but on the other side, the expertise as well. Because I know, Ravi, for you guys, you were looking at building a reference architecture, as you've described, that you could apply across all of these brands, the ones that you have already acquired, the ones you'll continue to acquire in the future, to not only help turn around what's happening in terms of technical debt, but also to empower all of the marketing teams that are busy trying to run in the midst of all of this transition and turn things around on the business side as well. But Dan, you guys have the advantage of not only knowing these technologies really well, but working with a variety of different customers. So even though you're not necessarily doing exactly the same thing for every customer, because each organization has a unique set of requirements, you've got the advantage of a perspective here that not only brings some of the benefit of that breadth of experience, but that's really what translated directly into building Bedrock out in the first place, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think, the big challenge for agencies in this space is the challenge of abstracting everything, right? You really have to look at it from the perspective of how many variables there are, and there are so many. So you really need to build a system that's flexible and doesn't draw any hard lines, which in engineering, that's a very large challenge. Traditionally, the strategy from an agency perspective is to treat every single project, and within an agency you have individual project teams that work on these different things, and they all have a different approach. And really the challenge is, believe it or not, it has little to do with the code and more to do with getting everybody on the same page about what the process needs to be for every single project, and bringing that together into a system, then aligning the code to that system. So really approaching this problem and making it work is so much more than just the code. It really is a paradigm shift for both agencies and multi-brand organizations like Saadia.
Yeah, it's fascinating too how we've seen a shift in our partner relationships that are starting to build accelerators like Bedrock, and you guys are kind of pioneering some of that because you've been working on this for a few years now. But it makes total sense when our customers come to us and they almost don't know where to start sometimes, and having a framework, really cohesive approach inclusive of other technologies that play really well with Contentful, it allows customers like the Saadia Group to kind of start with a leg up than starting from scratch. So we're really seeing that kind of trend, especially around composable commerce with agency-driven accelerators. I think, Nicole, you were going to jump in there right after Dan. I took your thunder a bit here.
No, not at all. I mean, it's the challenge, I think, as well, is how do we encapsulate some of that knowledge and learning from across multiple customers and really try to formalize it. So, it's the combination of supporting Ravi, what you and your team are trying to do with the pace that you have to work at, and Dan turning that into something that does become repeatable and reusable in terms of a framework. I'm wondering if others who are here joining us in this conversation face a similar set of challenges. I mean, the need for speed is clearly a big one. I'm curious if Ravi's experience here is similar to what others in this discussion or listening to this discussion face. Throw your comments in. We're eager to have everybody be part of this discussion as well. If there are particular issues or questions you've got about how Ravi and Dan have put together to do this, along with Contentful, we're all ears as well.
Yeah, and that on those comment sections, we can see those and help to answer your questions live if you are so inclined to put them in there. But so I'm kind of curious now, back to Ravi, how did the solution and kind of plan that the Stable helped lay out for you, how did that work holistically for your team, and what aspects of it helped make the day-to-day management of your team easier?
So one of the things is, one of the goals was the speed was very, very primary for us, and we take pride. Almost we completed this project in 3 months. That's like a great job. Stable's team. And also I would say is the project is like what Dan said, it's not just about code execution. It's also about the adoption too. And also we are placing some very, very new things. So Contentful, and they were like our search partner, our personalization, or a lot of these things are coming up new. And this project also involved like ensuring that our users and the people who are using it, associates, all are also training and extracting the value out of it 200%. So that's and Stable's team did a great job, and adding to what Dan was saying, in aligning different business partners. So we have these different, not only the business stakeholders, but also different brands who have engaged and having a point of view, and aligning them and getting to a common solution which works for everybody, and then implementing this and then launching it all at once with a very, very short duration of time. That's made it very, very complex for us. And also we have to execute it very, very fast because, as Nicole mentioned, like we are losing money, and nobody wants to lose money. Everybody wants to make money. So we want to lose, and we want to lose and we want to do as optimally as possible. And also do the right things for our business and our customers. So we don't want to impact our customers in any way. I know they go through a lot because of the distressed nature of the businesses they're in, but now they have some hope because we have some iconic brands like Lauren Taylor, New York and Company, where they have so much of passionate customers who love that we are we're rebuilding them and bringing these iconic American brands back to life and back to its big vigor.
Yeah. So much of a big piece of this time to market that we're talking about so much, especially in, brands that you're trying to get more digital quickly, is creating something once and then kind of reusing it across the brand. So Dan, could you speak a little bit about how your approach to content modeling really helps organizations that have multiple brands under one roof, and how that content model can be shared across the different brands?
Absolutely. And I mean, it takes some participation from, someone like Ravi in the Saadia Group to understand the value of a unified content model, across different brands, and being able to have the influence on those brands to adopt that content model. So obviously that's a bit of a prerequisite, and there can be edge cases for certain implementations. But, in general, the idea of a content model, or more simply a data model, is what's behind everything that we're doing. It's trying to come up with a content model or a data model that services all of the different potential permutations of what this thing is, right? So building a large enough, comprehensive enough data or content model is step one. Right. Even when we look at the multiple implementations of an entire storefront, it all comes down to, building the one thing that will service them all. And that is really the biggest challenge is understanding out of the gate, how can we build a content model that is going to be robust enough to service all instead of just focusing on one. And that's, like I said, that's the big paradigm shift that we're talking about, is looking at your business from a holistic perspective instead of an individual perspective. And that's, I think, what the spirit of composability really is.
It's interesting because coming at this from the content perspective, that mindset change is subtle but very, very significant. So we still have a tremendous amount of freedom to, Ravi, to borrow from what you guys are doing. Each of these brands is different. Lord & Taylor is a very distinctive brand in its own right. What your other brands are doing is not going to be exactly the same as what they're doing. And yet the structure of what they're producing, the types of content that they need, really are very, very consistent. So none of these brand websites are going to look exactly the same, but the underlying structure behind them is very, very similar, if not exactly the same. So it's fascinating from that content creation standpoint, because in a sense, it gives us a lot more freedom to be creative, because it puts us in a position where we don't have to think about all the things that need to be created. That stuff is already pretty well defined in the content model. We therefore can focus on what are the actual substantial things that go into those content models. What does the brand creative look like? How do we want to approach product descriptions? What is it we want to pull together in terms of promotional banners, for example, and how do we want to highlight what the merchandising is that we really want to be promoting, and how quickly we want to change that. All of that stuff is in our hands as the creatives and the merchandisers or the marketers. And we don't have to worry about how it all happens, because that's already built into the combination of the content model. And Ravi, as I know you've already pointed to, the broader tech stack that you've built out. So not just all the back-end systems that are integrated, but even how that gets presented in the front end, and what multiple channels you might be using across websites, across mobile apps, or anything else where this stuff is going to be presented as well. I'm curious, Ravi, what has the reaction been from your different marketing and merchandising teams across these different brands? What is that transition like for them?
So, so the way we operate our business, or what we think about ourselves, is part content, part commerce, and part community. So content being is not just a pure e-commerce right now, because the way it's evolved is content is also playing an equal part in terms of in addition to providing the product or service, but we also make sure that we are educating our customers. We are making sure that they're making the right decision, and we are making sure that we want to engage with them in a more meaningful way. And the content and having that flexibility for the marketing and e-com operations team to engage with the customers more on a real-time basis, or even able to schedule and pre-plan it, gives them a lot of flexibility. And it's a no-brainer. They liked it, they love it, and also it also helps them on collaboration side of the things, because they have their individual workspaces that they can work on, and there are so many brand guardrails that have been set in place because of the atomic design principles we were talking about. They don't have to worry about what fonts they select. They don't have to worry about what type of color they're thinking about, what type of button styles or anything, because all are set in the content models, content types, and everything, where we build those templates and trying to grow. And as we learn from them, we also try to improve the content types, content models, and everything, and mature along with them. But it provides a great platform for them to collaborate and also engage with their customers in the markets in real time, and also have the ability to view and schedule. So they have been loving it, and hope they continue to love it. And also from our perspective, we like it because the speed, which is also a very big component when we were selecting Contentful, it renders in a very sub-second speed to us, which is one of the big drivers for us to go headless and on composable approach. And Contentful fits that need.
I can say firsthand as a Contentful user too. I agree. I think this is part of the power. Dan, I'm curious, because you guys are in a position of really trying to negotiate as you're helping to build and define what these content models are, the needs and requirements of the development and technical teams, but also ultimately the people who are using this stuff in content and merchandising teams. Any words of wisdom there from your perspective about how to get that balance right as you look across your set of clients that you're working with?
I would say communication. Have everybody be part of the conversation that is going to have to be using the tools as early on as possible, because I think the concept of building in this way is that you're measuring twice or three times and cutting once, right? And part of doing that is making sure that you're considering all of the options, all of the people, and all of the technology up front. Which historically hasn't really been the way things work. One or two people are in the discovery session, they make all of the decisions, and along the way we find that 22 other people had opinions about how it should be done. You go back to the drawing
And everyone has an opinion. Trust me.
Yeah. And all of the cooks walk into the kitchen at the same time.
Yes.
And I think all of the cooks should be in the kitchen from the beginning, as painful as that sounds. But I think that's always a step one to getting this right.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we're kind of changing up what has typically been a very linear design process. Right. I mean, what we tend to see is that, there's a plan for redesigning the website, and, the design team might get in there. There might be a design system that's built or modified. The development team then works with the design team, and content eventually gets pulled in, like maybe the marketers that are actually responsible for creating promotions see this at the tail end. And that's really how it's worked. And it's typically a pretty protracted process. And unless you want to go back through the cycle all over again, iterations can be a bit of a challenge. They're certainly time consuming. So what we're talking about is turning that on its ear to a large degree. And it might be slower, Dan, as you say, when you get everybody in the kitchen at the same time in those initial phases. But what you're effectively doing when you get the content model design right, and also the integrations that are part of that tech stack, is you're actually giving a tremendous amount of freedom to the individual teams to go and work on their own without needing to do this in such a linear way. People can work in parallel between dev teams, again, merchandisers, marketers, because those guardrails are pretty clear. And, I know depending on how the systems are actually designed and set up, even pure content teams can go in and to a large degree shape digital experiences. I don't know, Ravi, how much rope do you guys give marketing and merchandising teams to go and shape stuff on their own?
We give a complete rope, so we want them to do that, all the rope. So I can give you one example, we launched Fashion to Figure live shopping experience from all the channels. Previously, before this composable approach, it almost they used to give us to the developers to insert some JavaScript code into our code base, so that we just do it right at the time, like 5 minutes before we insert the code, we turn it on. There's some activity going on, and we have to make sure that the marketing team, the social marketing teams, the merchandising teams, and IT all have to be synced up and coordinate this effort. But with the Contentful and the composable approach, everything, the entire social marketing live channel can be set, or the live event can be set right with the marketing and social media collaborating themselves without the involvement of IT. We would love to be involved, but the thing is, we want to empower them so they can do their jobs without, as soon as possible and at their convenience and their pace, and completely coordinate and launch it, and completely be seamless and working flawlessly. So that was from a day-to-day perspective how it helped. I can give you more and more examples of these kind of things that help them completely make them empowered and take all the rope as much as they would like, and build and create that experiences and engage with the customers in real time. Because what we believe in is because of social media channels and everything that are happening, the engagement is happening more real time, I would say near real time. Yeah. And the more we empower them and provide the tools to engage with them in a more real time basis, or change the content depending on the events that are happening, or it would be it's a game changer.
And it's so interesting to me that historically in these types of large organizations that have multiple brands, each business unit or each brand might be using a different CMS, and because some decision was made in the past that these groups can operate independently. However, that kind of pulls them away from each other. And instead, with this composable commerce approach and with the use of Accelerator, you can invest time into setting up that priority brand and then kind of start replicating that over across the other brands within that org. And that is something that is particularly, appealing to CTOs, chief digital officers, getting that consistency across. And then back to what you were saying, Nicole, like around then it really unlocks the roles and responsibilities of the folks working within those brands to start getting really creative with content and personalization and adding data layers in and getting to those really like those key moments where you're really seeing who your customers are, your end customers. And I think that sometimes that's really a bit, that's a whole essence of what Contentful is pushing around scaling content models and scaling the ability to empower your teams to work creatively, but consistently.
Yeah. I mean, who doesn't like empowerment, right? I mean, that's what we all want in our jobs, but it's great when what you're empowered to do is really focus on the important stuff because you're not worried about how you're going to execute, how you're going to get stuff to market, how you're going to be able to interact with customers. You're focused on the important stuff, the substance of what you're communicating, who you're communicating with, how you're engaging them, and how you build that into a long-term relationship.
Yeah, and that can be even pushed up to a leadership level where they're kind of deciding the structure, the content model, the taxonomy, the pieces that are really important to the overall business, and then the individual business units. That kind of personalization, or that kind of customization around what's important to who starts to play out when you have that foundation in place and repeatable foundation.
I think overall we're all living in a really, really exciting time in content and e-commerce where you have these organizations who have been doing it that way for so long. And, that is a result of the fact that the new way didn't exist. And I think, when I said we live in an exciting time, it's because that new way not existing is an area of opportunity, right? You have these large organizations operating incredibly inefficiently. And that's a huge, huge space for opportunity if those organizations can just make the decision and shift their mindset into thinking about how do we bring all of that together? How do we take this from a top-down approach instead of a bottom-up approach?
Yeah, and that could be a tricky balance sometimes with certain organizations. You want the people at the ground level writing code to feel empowered, but you also want structure and direction from the top. And I think this type of approach really does kind of hit both sides of that nicely in the middle. So we do have about 10, 15 more minutes here, and I want to encourage anyone in our audience to ask some additional questions. I think I see one or two coming in, and while we're waiting for those, I think we've definitely touched on reusability, flexibility. We've definitely talked about speed a bunch. We're curious, now that these projects have started to complete within the Saadia Group and the Stable, what's next for your two organizations as you're working together? What's on the horizon for Saadia Group now that this foundation's been put into place?
Oh, Ravi, you're on mute.
Okay. So now that we have put this foundation, we are trying to replicate this across the brands and the same. We kind of fly the plane while we are building the plane. Also also for the brands that we have built, we are continuously monitoring and optimizing it. So one of the things that when we selected Contentful, the one thing that we got excited about is it's not a closed platform. It's on the cloud. That's great, good. And also it's not a closed system, but it's an open system. It has a lot of extensibility built into it in terms of ability to create the apps. So we are thinking about expanding and extending the platform, like some of the things that we can think about that we are exploring or want to do in the next coming months is how do we integrate generative AI into Contentful to generate these content models within this. One could be like what some of the we are still brainstorming, but some of the ideas that we are thinking about is can the SEO be automated? Like can we write a API to ChatGPT or some kind of generative AI tools to automate the SEO so that so that we can get the best of what the tools can apply, and also maybe look at even some of the other content blocks that can be that we can leverage generative UI. So those are some of the things we are trying to extend the models. We are trying to leverage and optimize the current what we have, and also replicate. So we are doing a lot. Covering all the phases.
Excellent. And it sounds like what your next challenge is kind of similar to one of the questions we just had from the audience. And I think I'm going to direct this at Dan, but do you have a specific solution to keep the taxonomy tagging aligned across organizations? And how does that relate to analytics and personalization?
Yeah, I would say from an analytics and personalization and an SEO perspective, those are things that, along with taxonomy and tagging of products, so on and so forth, you can unify and reuse the structure. But the actual content itself, obviously, if you're a multi-brand organization, one brand is a cosmetics brand and the other brand is high fashion, right? You're going to have some differentiation between those two things, but the structure of how it is put together from a tiered perspective and how it's furthermore surfaced to the storefront layer, to the experience layer, so on and so forth down the line, that can be standardized, that can be proceduralized. So that's a really good example of where you can unify as many things as you want, but there's always going to be some sort of edge case where there has to be differentiation across the brands. And I think the whole idea of content modeling and giving those things a space to live is what we're talking about here. Not necessarily unifying that all across and have everything pull from the same source of or same pool of tags, right? I don't think that's the idea here. It's mostly about structure.
I was going to say, I'm curious, Ravi, I know you guys use the same content models across different brands. Do you guys use the same tagging across brands, or do you have distinct tagging per brand? Oh, you're on mute again.
So it automatically mutes me, I guess. So we have different tags across brand because what we say is the content model and content types can be shared across, but the actual content is completely different for each brand. And tags is part of that. Tags, because every product and their customers are different, so the way we tag are completely different, and the values will be different, but the components itself will be reused to the most part. But also each brand may have their own content types too and models too, because as Dan said, every brand has their own edge cases and it's completely flexible. So we want to make sure that we reuse as much as possible, but also create those differentiated content models that are very specific to the brand, so that they can engage with their customers in the most as per the brand needs and style.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually a good segue into another audience question that we have, and that is, what does the training process look like for multi-brand clients using Contentful compared to a single brand storefront? What is the amount of configuration and setup? So I'm curious on, because Ravi, you're, directing a whole group of your employees who are adopting this technology. So I'm curious what your training perspective looks like. And then of course, Dan, what is an agency's view on training organizations on how to do this?
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know who you want to go first. Yeah, so I mean, on the agency side, for clients, everything that we do requires some sort of training documentation. Even our developers adopting Bedrock, there needs to be some sort of training. I'll say that in all cases, if you've done your job correctly in unifying the content model and unifying the process from brand to brand to brand, there is a certain level of conformity across all of those things that can be trained. And everything else is the freedom, right? So, if all you have 6 brands and all 6 brands, from a training perspective, get trained on how to add content, how to preview, how to schedule things, how to add promotions, so on and so forth down the line. Quite literally everything else that is brand specific is the delta of freedom, right? That's all of the things that brand can kind of go rogue on. And then it becomes up to the organization where that line is drawn.
I love the delta of freedom, Dan.
Delta of freedom.
Yeah.
And Ravi, how is training your folks, your team around this in conjunction with the stable?
So, from the training perspective, one of the reasons why we chose Contentful, because the UI is pretty intuitive. Especially we've been doing the content before but they were a little bit end of life systems. But when we looked at Contentful, it had all the modern UI elements, which is much more user friendly and intuitive. But at the same time, we also took the training very, very seriously too, just to get all the best practices and making sure that we are doing it right. So in that's where Stables came in and helped our teams and e-com operations, marketing, and web content writers, and everybody explaining the whole width and what the tools can offer, and providing them all the best practices too, because we wanted to understand the best practices. How do we create these content models? What are the content types that we have to set? What are the pages and templates? How do we scale across multi-brands? And how do multiple users can collaborate? And also, what are the guardrails that we put in place? And also, we take inclusivity to be very, very, very important as well. So all the Contentful also supports the best practices for making sure we are ADA compliant, not just the text, but also images and everything, and those kind of guardrails. So training was very helpful, and Stables team helped us a lot. And at the same time, the tool design itself is very intuitive. And some of the systems that we were using for content, this made it even more intuitive, and they found it very, very easy and very, very intuitive. So we found, even if we get a new resource onboarded, maybe within a week or 2 weeks, they get pretty they understand the system basics. They may not be the experts, but they understand they can get the job done. And then they can start innovating and be like a evangelist maybe in a month or 2 months.
Yeah, we love to hear that. Like, people can get up and running with our platform in just a few weeks. That's like really incredible to hear, especially if it's going to be a main part of their role and responsibility daily. And then, of course, from the Contentful side around training, especially around, we call this orchestration, is a piece of that where you have multi spaces representing multiple brands. We have so many resources at our learning center and professional services that complement our product as well. All right, I think that is it for the Q&A from the audience. I want to go around the room. Are there any closing statements you guys would like to make about multi-brand composable commerce?
I'll stand on my soapbox for a second.
Yeah.
I think just from a composable perspective, I just want to offer this analogy for kind of what composable means to me, and I think it may be useful to anybody watching. So I'd like everyone to imagine you just purchased your first house, you just got married, you spent the last 5 years learning its quirks and its issues. You realized you hate carrying laundry up the stairs. You only have a 1-car garage, but you have 3 cars. Your kitchen stove is electric, but it just doesn't get hot enough. Composable is akin to buying some land and building a house with an upstairs laundry, gas range, and a 3-car garage, and putting your last name on a little stone that sits by the end of the driveway near the street. It's yours. You made it how you want or really need it to be. So that applies to content, that applies to commerce, that applies to basically the new way of the world in terms of constructing things for multiple brands or multiple clients.
Oh, Dan, I'm going to piggyback on that one because I love that analogy. It resonates a little too closely with me because we spend way too much time doing house projects. But yeah, I think the other important part of this is that if you decide that you really want to go with that induction after you've put the gas stove in, guess what? You can. And anything that you want to change or adapt and modify as your needs change, as your priorities change, you know, you may just have a change of heart entirely and decide you want to make some radical shifts. You can do that. And it's so much easier and more straightforward than it's ever been before. Yes, there's always pain involved in change, but the degree and the speed with which we can make those adaptations is honestly unlike anything we've had before.
Correct. Couldn't agree more.
And also from my perspective, you know, I love that house analogy. And to continue on that, like as a digital first business, like disruptions are happening everywhere, and no one particular system is able to completely solve the customer's problem. We have hyper personalization going on, and several products coming in and solving customer needs. So we want to create a framework that we can build upon each of these innovative products combined to provide that amazing customer experience that our customers are expecting right now. And who knows, in that house, maybe future technology, also making future proof to our investments. So who knows, in that, like maybe an innovation comes up, like instead of gas stove, we would have some kind of new disruptive process of cooking. And then in composable approach, we can just replace that stove with this new approach, innovative, and improve our customer experience and continue to amaze our customers, and also protect our investments too. That is very, very important from our side. From private equity group, we also want to minimize our risk too. You know, like we want to lay a foundation and a framework that allows us to innovate and continuously connect to the customers. And also, what I would say is, from a community perspective, we're also building a community too. So it takes a community to build a community, and for the community to interact, it's not an individual person. They have to interact and adopt and work together. And having the process and workflows in place is also very, very key. And that's what we use when we select all the composable components within that they allow for this collaboration and speed to market, and also provide an open systems that way we can innovate and utilize the opportunity, you know, for the disruptions that are happening or innovations that are happening, and leverage and hyper focus and customize and personalize for our customers what they want.
It's funny when we get to a point where the technology gets good enough that it's kind of out of the way and we're able to really focus on the relationships, the people involved, whether that's internally with our colleagues or directly with our customers. It's great.
It's the beauty of all of this, I think, getting closer in that part. So I think we're about to wrap up then. Speaking of community, thank you to everyone who joined in today. We hope this was informative and fun and interesting conversation. To our speakers, Dan, Nicole, and Ravi, thank you for taking the time to discuss composable commerce in multi-brand scenarios. And if anyone in the audience has any questions for the Contentful team or for our guests, please feel free to reach out to me, Caitlin Green at contentful.com, and we will get you connected to these wonderful folks. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
And thank you.